Nain Campbell, a poised and brilliant black woman, was navigating the bustling corridors of JFK International Airport. On the surface, she looked like an ordinary traveler, dressed casually in a sweatshirt and jeans, with a small rolling suitcase and a backpack. But Nain wasn't just any traveler. She was an undercover FBI agent returning from a high-stakes operation in Los Angeles, where she successfully dismantled a major international money laundering ring. Only a select few in the FBI knew the full extent of her work. Nain maintained a composed and confident presence despite the chaos of the airport. However, her calm was disrupted when Officer Ronald Mendez, a bitter and prejudiced airport cop, spotted her and immediately suspected her of suspicious activity. Mendez, a 15-year veteran of airport security detail, had grown cynical and resentful after a string of misconduct complaints landed him in airport duty rather than street patrol. His gaze narrowed on Nain. Her quiet confidence unsettled him, and his prejudice drove him to action. Nain walked toward the baggage claim area, even though she had no checked luggage. Her mind was already focused on her next steps. She needed to debrief with her superior at the FBI's field office, and she rehearsed in her mind how she would summarize the intelligence gathered from the Los Angeles operation. 2 years of undercover work had led to the dismantling of an international criminal network. But now, as she walked through the airport, she sensed something, a feeling of being watched. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Mendez. He was standing stiffly near a Starbucks kiosk, a cup of coffee in one hand and his radio in the other. His eyes followed her with cold intensity. Nain had dealt with this before. Officers who couldn't comprehend how a confident black woman could walk with such authority. Still, she ignored him, keeping her pace even and relaxed. But Mendez wasn't done. He stepped in her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mendez said, his voice sharp. Nain stopped and turned toward him, her expression calm but guarded. "Yes, officer." "ID and boarding pass." Nain raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Random inspection," Mendez replied, his gaze hardening. Nain knew better. Airport security procedures were clear. TSA handled security checks, not airport cops. But Mendez was clearly testing her. She calmly pulled out her ID and boarding pass, handing them over without hesitation. Mendez studied her ID, flipping it over as if searching for hidden details. "Nain Walker," he read aloud. "From Washington, D.C., business or pleasure?" "Business." "And what kind of business?" "Legal consulting," Nain replied smoothly. Mendez narrowed his eyes. "Legal consulting? Huh? Got any proof of that?" Nain smiled faintly. "Do I need to?" "Well, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind if I check your bags," Mendez said, his tone taking on a predatory edge. Nain's smile faded. She had nothing to hide, but allowing Mendez to search her belongings would create a scene. It would also risk exposing her undercover status. She debated showing her FBI badge to shut him down, but doing so would compromise her cover. "I prefer not to," she said, her voice steady. "It's a routine check," Mendez snapped. "If you're clean, there's no reason to refuse." Nain exhaled slowly, measuring her response. Drawing attention wasn't an option. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but let's do this in a more private area." Mendez's mouth twisted in disappointment. He had been hoping she would resist. He led her toward a nearby security corridor. Another officer, Morales, watched from a distance but didn't intervene. It was clear that Mendez had a reputation for these kinds of aggressive inspections. Inside the corridor, Mendez rifled through her suitcase with rough hands. He swabbed her toiletry bag, tested her electronics, and even powered on her laptop. The screen prompted for a password. "You say you're a legal consultant?" Mendez asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. "Mind if I take a look at your files?" Nain's expression didn't change, though irritation burned beneath the surface. "Actually, I do mind. Those are privileged client files." "It's airport security," Mendez sneered. "I have the right to inspect anything I want." Nain's patience thinned. Airport police don't have the authority to search electronic devices without a warrant. And unless you suspect me of crime, suspicious activity is enough. Mendez leaned in, his voice low. "You think you're above questioning?" Nain's jaw tightened. I'm asking you to return my property. Mendez smirked. And if I don't? Nain took a deep breath. She had played along long enough. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a small leather case, and flipped it open. Special Agent Nain Campbell, FBI. Mendez's smirk vanished. His mouth opened slightly in disbelief. You're FBI. Nain's eyes were like steel. Yes, and you just violated about half a dozen federal search and seizure protocols. For the first time, Mendez looked unsure. You never said. I didn't have to, Nain said coolly, because you had no probable cause. Now, give me back my property, or I'll make sure this gets escalated to internal affairs. Mendez's hand trembled as he handed her the laptop. His face was pale, his bravado slipping. Next time, officer, Nain said as she zipped her suitcase closed, try asking questions without racial profiling. After leaving the airport, Nain reported the incident to her superior. Special Agent in charge Victoria Reese immediately opened an internal investigation. FBI background checks confirmed what Nain had suspected. Mendez had a history of excessive force, harassment, and racial profiling. Several complaints had been buried under internal reviews. 2 days later, Nain returned to JFK. Mendez spotted her again, but this time his expression was tight with nervous energy. He approached her cautiously. Miss Walker, he said. Nain turned, arching an eyebrow. It's Agent Campbell. Agent Campbell, Mendez said. Listen, about the other day. Before he could finish, 2 FBI agents approached. Officer Mendez, one of them said, flashing a badge. You need to come with us. Mendez's face drained of color. What's this about? You're under investigation for multiple counts of misconduct and racial profiling. Please cooperate. Mendez looked at Nain, panic flashing in his eyes. You. Nain smiled faintly. Actions have consequences, officer. As Mendez was led away in handcuffs, the surrounding passengers watched in stunned silence. Nain stood tall, her gaze unwavering. She had done her job. Justice had been served. In the following months, the FBI's investigation uncovered more instances of Mendez misconduct. He had targeted passengers of color repeatedly, fabricating evidence to justify aggressive searches. Mendez faced criminal charges, lost his job, and became a public example of the dangers of unchecked authority. Nain's testimony at the trial sealed his fate. Mendez was convicted of abuse of authority and racial profiling. His downfall prompted reforms in airport security procedures and greater oversight of airport police. As for Nain, she returned to her undercover work, knowing that this victory was more than personal. It was a step toward dismantling systemic injustice. She had exposed more than just a corrupt cop. She had exposed the cracks in the system that enabled him. And for Nain Campbell, the fight for justice was just beginning.